Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict show. So glad to be with you guys. So, uh, what I want to talk to you today about is the trip the President of the United States is taking. He's already there in Europe. Is going to be addressing NATO, and we're going to be talking about three key areas about this trip. First of all, is NATO. Second is G7, and third is Poland. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my geopolitical analyst hat and provide you a brief analysis as to what it all means, and we'll just go from there. So, but before I launch into this, let me just mention some admin stuff, if I may. First of all, if this is your first time to this channel, please subscribe. I remember seeing one comment from one of our viewers mentioning that we are short by about 20,000 subscribers, whatever. I, I don't understand that world of how this stuff works, whatever. But I am wondering as to the content we provide. We're not talking about kitty cats playing here. So, and you wonder by now, sort of, how come the subscriber numbers is not going up? So, I don't know what goes behind the scenes, whatever YouTube is doing. I do not know, but I do question that one. So, second thing is remember to join us for a live stream this coming Friday on the other platform. I'm going to post a description for you so you'll have an idea about the topic and so forth. Third thing is Ross still here. Some of you has been asking, where is Ross? Yes, he's still here. He will be doing a video with me later on, and we're going to launch that one. Same with Elizabeth. She's still here. We are all here. Just as I said last time, guys, I do this stuff because that falls within my wheelhouse, and I kind of, it's easier quickly for me to come over and just do a brief analysis for you. So, and the last thing I want to talk about before I jump into the topics has to do with the two questions I asked last time. Regarding the first one, Singapore, yes, a majority of you sort of hit the nail on the head as to wondering what that is. Well, here is the answer. And I'm going to just say something here briefly about that. That has to do with an investigation that was conducted by the Treasury Department regarding some money laundering schemes that took place in Singapore. So you put the two and two together, and figured why Singapore would have, excuse me, why Singapore will have to toe the line within what the U.S. is asking. So the second question was about U.S. China's policy, whether it will go back to its sort of way it was before, based on pragmatism. And I agree with the majority of your answers. Yeah, I don't see that happening, given what's going on. And I'm going to be mentioning something about it today when I launch into this and providing you this analysis about what's going on. So, well, anyway, let's talk about NATO. As to because the president is going for this emergency summit with NATO to discuss the ongoing deterrence and defense efforts in response to Russia's unprovoked and unjustified attacks on Ukraine. That was the statements coming out of the White House, by the way, which I found very sort of ridiculous, to say the least, as to how the wording of something like this, that we're all now realizing some information is coming out to light as to truly what this is all about. I had to go and dig into some of my own personal archives, and I'm going to share something with you regarding this wording of the unprovoked aggression by the Russians, and for you to understand why Western media is not sort of saying the truth as to what led to all this. Well, what I'm going to disclose with you is a documentary. It's a document that was released from none other than William Burns. And if you know who William Burns is, the current CIA director. And this was when he was because he served as an ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Russia from 2005 to 2008. So in one of his memoirs, he wrote, and I quote here, sitting at the embassy in Moscow in the mid-90s, it seemed to me that NATO expansion was premature at best and needlessly provocative at worst. End of quote. In another one, Burns wrote, saying, and I quote here, hostility to early NATO expansion is almost universally felt across the domestic political spectrum while in Russia. And the last quote from William Burns, it says, Ukrainian entry into NATO is the brightest of all red lines for the Russian elite, not just Putin, in more than 2.5 years of conversation with key Russian players from braggers and the dark recesses of the sharpest liberal critics. I have yet to find anyone who views Ukraine and NATO as anything other than a direct challenge to Russian interests. End of quote. And that is the reason why I wanted to highlight this. I had to dig through my own archives when I was doing the research for my own book about Russia, which I can, if you get a chance to read it, please do so. You'll find some very, very key information on it. So this is where the idea of this NATO summits and all that, which we all know, it's nothing but to push the chaos towards more and more. Till when? Because here is the danger. And once again, as a former military myself, and I think in terms of what will be the military reactions should Russia ever feel threatened. Well, there is something that I found in my research when I was writing the book, is that Russian military doctrine, okay, it envisions the use of nuclear weapons in a first use scenario. What all this means? It means that if Russia felt that is losing a conventional conflict, it's going to result to the use of nuclear weapons. So Ukraine exactly is the scenario for which this was developed to begin with. And this is why we need to understand all the hype is going to be emanating from NATO summits. It's just going to be amounts to just bravado, basically. No. Let alone the Ukrainian president gave a speech pre-meeting of NATO. Well, should I take his word? I have nothing against the guy, but the guy is a comedian, let alone how corrupted he is. So there are things emerging now as far as the depth of the corruption itself, to the point that now the Ukrainian president has banned any opposition party from running for office. And that makes me put a big question mark about, his understanding of what democracy is all about. The second aspect to the trip that President Biden scheduled to do is to address G7. Well, the G7 are the most industrialized entities, advanced, rich, whatever you want to call it, according to IMF. It includes the US, France, Germany, Italy, Canada, Japan, and the UK. Now, will I count Italy as a very rich country? Will I count Canada as a rich country? Will I count the UK as a rich country? It depends how you view that one. So personally, I don't, or France for that matter. But why is that important? Well, it is important because, remember, the sanctions that's been imposed on Russia. As a matter of fact, Russia today announced that they will accept rubles as a form of payment from the, and I put this in quotes, from the unfriendly countries, including all EU members, all the European Union members, which is 21 or 28 countries altogether. So, but this also comes on the heels of the last conversation between Saudi Arabia and China. As a matter of fact, it was a meeting today between Wang Yi and the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia, in which they issue statements as saying that Saudi Arabia and China are friends. Once again, guys, in a geopolitical landscape or international relations, as I always say, context matters. So those words are not used loosely and are very, very chosen for specific intention, is to send a message. So for China, and Saudi Arabia issuing a statement like that, that tells me a lot. And why is this? Is because last week Saudi Arabia announced that it is considering accepting the yuan, the Chinese currency, as a form of payment for oil. And once again, why is this important? Well, it is important because Saudi Arabia is considered one of the top oil producers, so exporter. China is considered one of the top importer of energy. And second, you take into consideration that India, Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, and 32 other countries that abstained from supporting the sanctions on Russia. And with the announcements of Russia today about accepting the rubles as a form of payment, they will not accept the dollar and they will not accept the euros. It tells me personally, as an analyst, where things are headed. It is a big concern. As an American, I am already thinking what's going to be happening to our currency next year. What's going to be happening to the currency 5 years from today. Because the strength of the US dollar has to do with the US dollar is used for all oil transactions at global level. But now that the Chinese currency, for example, which by the way was added in 2015 to the international baskets of currencies, it doesn't take a genius to see where things are headed. So it behooves policymakers in Washington to think about the doomsday. That is, it's no laughing matter, because once the US dollar is weak, that's very problematic here in the United States. And this is why I am concerned personally when I hear statements emanating from Washington about we're going to go and sanction China. Really? Do you have any idea? Do you, this individual beside the president or whomever is advising the president, do they have any idea what does it mean if China reciprocate? Well, let me tell you a scenario in case you happen to be an American watching this video here. What's going to be happening to us here in the US is that the price is going to jack up far beyond what we can sustain. And second, you won't have anything on the shelves because everything is produced in China. So is this why we want to go ahead and sanction China? So it's almost what I'm frustrated with. It's the idea that those policymakers, those who are supposed to guide our foreign policy, they don't think, or they are not thinking about scenarios of what if, which is a basic principle you do when it comes down to formulating a strategy or a foreign policy, whatever that might be. And they are not thinking about the next day. They're not thinking about the next 5 years. They're not thinking about the next 10 years. It's almost like they're looking at the end of their nose, not seeing far, like what's taking place right now. And this is, in my humble opinion, this is why the president is going to Europe. Why? Because the division exists within the Transatlantic Relations, regardless what you hear. Of course, they're not going to disclose that. Because you got now some British ministers, which Britain, I would not even, no offense to Britain, it's irrelevant. Let's just say it the way it is. UK is irrelevant. I mean, so for them, at least, they are now concerned. And what they are concerned about? They're concerned about German and French presidents and chancellor, the French president Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Why British ministers are concerned? Because they're concerned with two leaders' conversation with the Russian president. This goes in parallel with now what some are saying within the G7 is that we need to exclude Russia from the G20 summit. Wait a minute. And by the way, the G20, the next G20 summit is going to be held in Indonesia. And right away, China is saying, you can't do that. because its convention, it's suggesting, Stephen, thank you so much for your super sticker, man. Appreciate it. Because the convention, the article or the clauses of the G20 does not allow any one member to exclude another. So this is why China is stating, and I quote here because I remember reading the content about it, is saying that Russia is an important member in the G20. So for now, the United States is debating, well, the clauses of the group suggest that no one member can take an action by removing another. So it's very, very problematic to begin with. Then the second question that we need to consider or think about will be the idea of what sort of statements President Biden is going to give G7, the most industrialized or rich country, whatever. Well, as I said earlier, I won't count Italy. I won't count Canada, France. I won't. You know, if I am to think on another country beside the United States, it will be Germany, because Germany is the fourth largest economy in the world. It's a rich country in Europe, and it carries weight on the global economy. You just can't deny that. So it becomes the question of is the president of the United States or is the U.S. concerned about the division within Europe? Because there is a conversation going on, according to some of my own contact, that, pardon me, this seeing things go in a different direction than anticipated. And now, with Russia announcing that they're only going to accept rubles as a form of payment from all EU members. So which means basically in the case of Germany, we'll take just as an example, since Germany imports about 40 to 46% of its energy or from of energy needs from Russia, that means now Germany will be forced to look elsewhere. Well, where are they going to look for? Towards the US, right? No, that will be wrong. Why? Because US will charge them 10 times that amount of what they pay in the Russians. There is now a conversation going on between Germany and Qatar, because Qatar has a lot of gas, natural gas. So the Germans are saying behind closed doors, you know, maybe we didn't think this through. Maybe we should reconsider. Let alone they are considering what this may lead to internally, because there is nothing that worrisome to a government than internal uprising. That is a big concern. And this is why, if you look at the agenda for the president's trip, for Biden's trip, it has to do with NATO, G7, and Poland. One more note on this G7 before I move into talking about Poland. So here's the interesting aspect of it. The interesting aspect is that the trip itself, President Biden's trip, comes on the heels of his latest statements that there will be a new world order that must be led by the US. So just read carefully when it says there will be a new world order that must be led by the United States, which you and I know it's not true, because the world is shifting already to a multipolar system. You know, that was very clear to when President Biden made the phone call to Saudi Arabia, to United Arab Emirates, and they didn't pick up the phone. It was also clear when the president of the United States made a phone call to China, and China made it clear that no, they are not going to sanction Russia, because strategically it doesn't make any sense for China to do that. And second, China is not going to rupture its relations with Russia. It won't. It will not. Mark my word on it. You know, geopolitically speaking, they will not do that. And this is why you're seeing that shift already with other countries. 32 countries didn't sign on to the sanctions on Russia. So basically, who's left? It will be just the US and Europe. And even in Europe, you're looking at a Western Europe not Eastern Europe, regardless what you hear. And that leads me to talk about my third point as part of this trip. And the third point is Poland. Why will President Biden make a trip to Warsaw? Which the trip is going to be, I think, on Friday, according to the agenda, basically, in which President Biden is going to hold bilateral talks with the president of Poland, Andrzej Duda. And the purpose of that, the bilateral trade, is to talk about the humanitarian crisis that's going on, the refugees. Well, why is that important? It's important because Poland is finding itself sucked into a conflict that they cannot manage. Poland is not a rich country. Poland is not Germany or France. Okay? Poland does not have the resources to maintain 2 million refugees coming across the border. So what will be the significance of the President of the United States trip to Poland? Is it just a window dressing, basically a show, a photo op, shall we say? Because that's what it will amount to. Because here's the thing that I'm finding out from some of my own sources. Polish people are getting really frustrated now that they are noticing, for example, Ukrainians are allowed to get on trains for free in Poland, while Polish people will have to pay. Another information that I came across to me from some of the trusted sources is that the government is giving families, Polish family who host a Ukrainian family, about 40 zlotys a day. Zlotys is the currency, the Polish currency. While at the same time, Poland is giving Ukrainians, the refugees, 300 zlotys. So you can see why Polish people are going to be a little bit upset moving forward. Because when you're dealing with refugees, this is not for a day or two or a week. You're looking at months, even years. And the Polish economy cannot sustain that because Poland is not a rich country. So the other aspects to it is that the President of the United States intends to let the Polish president that we, the United States, might be sending more American troops to Poland. And that is where I'll say to myself, if I am to put myself in Polish shoes as an advisor to the president there, what would you advising him on a situation like this? Because the way I read it, it's we are pushing Poland to the front line. In other words, you're sacrificing Poland. That's the bottom line to it. And this is why you are noticing some Eastern countries, like, for example, Romania, like Bulgaria, like Hungary, they're saying, we're not getting involved. Yes, you might send some equipment, but the equipment stays here, and that's all we can do. It's because they are realizing where things are headed. It's no small matter because now the Ukrainian president, given his corruption that is now emerging to the forefront, given his approach to governing by now banning 11 political parties, those are from the opposition. And by the way, those 11 parties holds the majority in a parliament. So you can't ban those all of a sudden. And you're saying you are fighting for democracy. Words and deeds, when they are the opposite, that's not a good sign. So, and this is where that concern as to where things are headed. And that is why I'm convinced, and again, this is my personal opinion, that the trip, beside the photo op and that NATO is united and all that stuff, the trip in itself is an indication for much deeper divisions that exist on the transatlantic relations. And I've been observing this long enough to know this is not just because of this current crisis. I've been observing this for the last 30 years or so. This is what the purpose of the trip. It's because there are voices inside Europe that now questioning the judgment, sort of questioning the pragmatism of decisions or policies that have been enacted or implemented so hastily, in my opinion. Once again, for us in Washington, it's kind of we didn't think through. You have to think through, especially when it comes down to formulating a foreign policy. But at the same time, our foreign policy is in shambles anyway, and it has been for a while. And folks in Washington do not like to hear that. There's a saying in Washington, when Washington doesn't like the message, it tends to shoot the messenger. So you got the idea. You're smart enough to know. And that is where my big concern, as a citizen, as an American, as a former military, as an analyst, I'm seeing things go in the wrong direction. And I'm trying, at least with this brief analysis here, somebody in possession of power, somebody in a position of authority could watch this and at least listen and learn from it. Because the objective is to ensure we're not heading over the cliff here. Because there will be no rescue after that. And we don't want to see that. Nobody wants that. Who wants to see that? How about that? Always the concept that and I believe in it. I'm not saying it just to say it to be Mr. Nice. Well, that's not me. I don't sugarcoat things. How about the concept of live and let live? Truly. And this is where I see where the trajectory of the geopolitical landscape is headed. And that's why I have the question for you towards the end. So it behooves the administration to think, our administration here in the US, to think in terms of how the policies it is formulating coincide with where the world is headed. That's almost like when, this is a basic analogy. When you swim, do you swim against the current? Because you're going to get nowhere. That's basically where I see our foreign policy is. We are swimming against the current. We're not going to get nowhere. You're just going to exert more effort for nothing, wasting all the energy. This is why I believe the trip is meant to be for, is to ensure that the division doesn't exist or doesn't expand beyond. The other point that I wanted to mention about it was the how the President Biden voiced a deep concern about Russia's alignment with China, or China's alignment with Russia, whatever you want to call it. Because the argument that was made is that, and this is based on the Jen Psaki, the press secretary, saying that the U.S. is very concerned, along with other allies. I'm going to have to say, hold on a second, that is not true. We are concerned, yes, but not other allies. All of the allies are concerned. No, they're not. You check in Europe, are they concerned about Russia and China? No, they're not. So let's not throw the words out there, because as I said earlier, in international relations, context matters. So when you throw a word out there saying that, well, we are concerned. Well, yeah, you are concerned because the global geopolitical landscape is evolving, is changing, not to our likings and not to the favor of the United States. And this is why I always fall back on history, because history, at least for me, I'm a student of history. I always like to read about what happened in history, because it tends to give me at least a path on which I can start to formulate my own analysis. And my reference here is to the how events are unfolding between China and Russia. You go back to the early 50s with the trip of Chairman Mao to Russia at the time when Stalin was in charge. What did Stalin do? He asked China to get involved in the Korean War, and China did, losing about 40%, using 40% of its budget, and losing, based on the record that I found, over 200,000 people, because China got involved for the Korean War for 3 years. Now it looks to me that the tide have turned, the tables have turned, and Russia is reaching out to China. Otherwise, how would you explain the Russian president's personal trip on February 4th to the Olympics, meeting with President Xi? I hope I pronounced it correctly. What would you make of the declaration or the statement that issued from both of them, over 5,000 words, of the joint agreement that their friendship has no limits? Is this now time for Russia asking China? And it looks to me it is. Why? Because history is repeating itself. Because what came after Mao trip to Soviet Union back then? The course of the international relations took a different direction. We moved into the United States. Yes, we came victorious after World War II, but that has changed. It's no different than what it is today. The world is not a unipolar anymore. And this is when I see statements emanating from Washington saying that the new global order under the leadership of the US, I'll take a step back. Let's not pretend it is the case, because that's an illusion. We are moving into a multipolar, or we have moved into a multipolar. The next location is going to be east, not the west, where the center of this new geopolitical landscape will be. It behooves us to start to think about how we're going to move forward with it. That's the way I see things as an analyst. I think in terms of the big picture. And this is why, just to recap everything here before I will leave you with the question of the day. So the president's trip, President Biden's trip to Europe, you have to put it within the context of what else is taking place around the world. For example, the Russian announcements today about using the ruble. China statements about you cannot dismiss a member of the G20 summit, because the upcoming summit, which will be, by the way, towards the end of the year in Indonesia. You think about it in terms of, for example, Australia and Singapore. Why did they issue sanctions against Russia? Well, for the first one, Australia is irrelevant anyway, whatever. And for Singapore, makes you, this is why I asked the question last time. But you have to always look at the history as to what's leading to that. Here is my question for you for today. Well, actually, let me conclude this. The current global system, it's so complex. The issues do not get resolved over a cup of coffee. Let me just say this straightforward. Because here's the thing, and it's the reality. So we need to confront, we in the West, at least I speak for myself here. I don't speak for others. For me, at least, that's how I'm going to confront, or I am confronting, the reality of the global system. So in this case, the US is on its last stretch of its global hegemony. And China is edging towards global supremacy, even right on the cusp of obtaining it. So many Westerners will kind of cast doubt about something like this. Oh no, it can't be. Yes, it is. Because many of them cast the doubt about, for example, how Russia could influence the global system. And it is influencing the global system. How China could manage the global system. and it is managing the global system. This is why I said earlier, statement like, we're going to sanction China. Really? You're going to have to think about the consequences of that. You can't just be you, the government, whatever government is. You can't be just throwing statements willy-nilly like this. No. Almost remind me of certain countries' foreign policy that is like, have no direction, have no strategy, have no vision whatsoever, including ours. But here's the thing. In this new setting, Russia's not going to do it alone. China's not going to do it alone. They were going to do it in conjunction with each other, because that's where lies their strength. Because the objective is to defeat the United States geopolitically. And I think I'm going to be doing a video later on with Ross next week, whatever. We're going to be talking about let me say thank you to Nikolek. Thank you very much, Nikolek, for your super sticker. Appreciate it. We're going to be doing a video about geopolitics in the 21st century, because you need to know sometimes, guys. We wanted to share this with you. So here's my question for the day, and I'm going to leave you with that, and we'll talk about it next time. Like I always say, guys, the purpose of the questions is just my way of having a conversation with you. And I truly enjoy it. I enjoy your insights. Thank you very much for sharing those. So here's the question. What sort of new global order should we expect in the 21st century? Once again, what sort of new global order should we expect in the 21st century? I hope you find this information very useful. And as always, guys, stay informed. Till next time. Bye-bye.